Hello and welcome to the Hypertrophy Odyssey, chapter 394. It is the fourth day of the week, aka the Buster Cannon workout. I am feeling very good right now on the way to the gym. But anyways, to the main subject matter for today, which I guess is slightly a continuation, but not really a continuation, but slightly a continuation of the series that I've been doing about hobbies. And today's episode is going to be about hobby jumping, because I think that although I've talked about the extremist in this episode, as well as just the hobby, giving up a hobby right here, just in general, as well as other hobbies, I think I've just talked about it in general. I think the hobby jumper is something that is an interesting phenomena because I've been there. I think everybody has been there and has tried it, or at least done it for a little while. But I think that I wouldn't say that there's a limit to it, but I'm always curious as to see why they do it, and also what is going on to the point where it seems as though it's always usually a common occurrence between people that certain aspects of each person that gets into certain hobbies that becomes the hobby jumper kind of all share similar characteristics to each thing. And that is one big ass thing, but we'll get there when we get inside. But first I'll say this: when I was younger, I was very much a hobby jumper. I was one to get into things for a little while and then continue on and try to get into other stuff. So I've dabbled in many of things. I think the thing I've technically dabbled in the most has been music, in the sense that I've gone from instrument to instrument, trying to learn it, not being very good and moving on, to the point where I think the most I got into when it came to being a hobby jumper was I had a phase where I wanted to become a DJ. I think that was like the most that I had ever gotten into it. But we'll go a little bit more into detail, my thought process while going through all of that, as well as a few other things, because I want to just look at it a little bit in a deeper sense, because it's an interesting phenomenon. I think a lot of people end up going through it. Obviously, some people go through it basically throughout their entire life, really, but it isn't necessarily bad, but it's also not necessarily good. There are some good and bad to it. Obviously, it all just depends, but we'll get into all of that and a few other details when we get on the inside. All right, so started this day off with leg extensions, which are pretty good. But anyways, back to the main subject matter for today: hobby jumping. So the main reason why I wanted to discuss this is because this does happen a lot, and I have been this person before. I, in my personal experience, have been a hobby jumper, going from one thing to another, especially when it comes to music. I was very into, the first instrument I ever played was the trumpet, then I moved to bass, and then I moved to guitar, and then I moved to DJing, and then I went behind the scenes and trying to do EDM music, basically. So I've been all over the place. I know how to get my way around a DAW on my own, but this is something that has been jumping within a niche itself, not necessarily outside of it, but this happened over years and years and years of wanting to do something musical. But at the end of the day, I realized a little bit later in life that it's just not for me. As well as drawings. Drawing is something that I did with my friend Walter. We did it for, shout out Walter, we did it for a month straight where we would draw every single day. And after those 30 days, I realized I am not a fan of drawing, but that's just kind of a different story for a different day in a certain sense. It was just an experiment to jump from one thing or another. And I think that a lot of people end up doing this, not only at the gym where they'll jump from exercise to exercise, but they'll do this as well in hobbies where they're chasing that novelty of something brand new, that feeling of, oh, hey, this is all new, this is all stimulus, that dopamine of doing something halfway decent for the first time, and then all of a sudden you're super into it. But a lot of people don't end up sticking with it a lot of the times, because at the end of the day, if they aren't good after that first time, they'll be like, maybe not, or they'll try it a couple of times and then call it a day, not really necessarily going into it too far deep. If they aren't getting immediate results, then obviously they're just going to call it. They're going to move on to something else that they could possibly do. And I think that happens a lot with a lot of these hobby jumpers. They'll go from one thing to another thing to another thing just to find that stimulus and hopefully find that one thing that they're decently good at, like an innate talent possibly. But some people don't get that at all. Some people don't even get that. Some people never get that innate talent thing that they have, where they'll just keep hopping from one hobby to another hobby to another hobby. It's like a never-ending game of musical chairs for them, where they'll stay at the novice level of whatever hobby they're into and just stay there forever. The forever novice, you know. This happens a lot with a lot of gym goers, where they'll go for a little while, stop forever, then come back, and then stop, and then go back. And a lot of people end up going into this vicious cycle, in which case they can never really evolve into the next thing. I understand it in a certain sense, where some people are super into the novel. They need something new. They need a new stimulus all the time. Personally, I don't like that, because I'd rather just stick my head down into one thing and try it as long as I can, because I know what it's like on the other side. I think that chasing that novelty is a little ridiculous and a little stupid, but at the same time, that's just me. I think a lot of people end up doing this because they try to chase the novelty of something new in their life, to try to have that addiction or the high of achieving something whilst being brand new at something. It's kind of like, it's like playing a musical instrument for the first time and you actually play something competently. There is something that is rewarding or a good feeling about that, regardless of whether I find it, regardless of what you may or may not be thinking about it, it's still a nice feeling to have achieved something. And a lot of people are addicted to that feeling, and a lot of the time that feeling can grow into other things that are actually probably worse than just hobbies. So they'll get into other things like hard drugs or like gambling and things like that. But that's kind of different than just hobbies. At least hobbies, you're not doing too much unless you start going the extremist route and just immediately get addicted to the dopamine that this one thing gave you, and then all of a sudden you're buying all the high-end equipment for stuff. And then the biggest issue is that people don't give these hobbies time. They have to give it time to develop, because if you're not, you're fucked. You're going to never really get anywhere with them, and you're just going to always be playing a game of musical chairs. The forever novice. And we're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing. Exercises not filmed, none. Exercises skipped, also none. Got everything in, thankfully. But anyways, to the main subject matter. Back to the main subject matter for today. Hobby jumping. So the main reason why I want to discuss this is because, one, I saw it on the list, and two, I saw it on the list. I think that, actually, I was watching a show and somebody mentioned it, how they just stopped doing a hobby immediately because they realized they weren't even going to be close to good at it. And I think that's the fundamental thing about it, is that a lot of people end up giving up hobbies before they actually kind of get a chance to see if they are in it for real or not. Obviously, there are some in which case that it doesn't take too much time, in which you can tell that it's just not your thing. That happened to me with drawing, as I've already probably discussed, but I think that does happen, but I don't even think people allow that feeling or that knowledge to even happen beforehand. They kind of just let it go, and then after maybe a little bit, then they will try it but not really get into it, not at least a good bit of it, but then will just give it up when they see that they're not as good as the top elite people, which of course is kind of, I wouldn't say asinine, because there is some genuine, like, all right, if you know you're not going to be the best, then, you know, then what is the point in a certain sense? But at the same time, those people literally are living their life doing the hobby, so it's a little bit of a different case. You know, if they didn't have that ability to do that thing, then they'd have a little bit of issue, you know, living. Whilst you, who is a person who's coming into this a little bit older in life, a little bit later in life, of course is not going to be the same level. Now, there are things about inherent talent and all that other stuff, which we'll probably get to in a different episode and all that, but I do think that if you don't give it at least a good chance for it to stick around, not necessarily going all crazy like the hobby extremists where you stay in it for a second and get all the best equipment immediately, but more so just wait in line, try to see how things go and bide your time a little bit in there and see if you actually like it. Because if you actually like it and enjoy it, then just keep going with it. Hell, this is technically a hobby here. If I didn't have the channel here, I wouldn't do the channel. I'd still be going to the gym, because that is taken over any type of deal where I love it no matter what. The channel is just a segment of my personal creativity that I'm getting out there. But if I had just stayed it and said, like, if I didn't like it, I would have probably already stopped by now, realistically, just because of growth and all the other efforts that I've had to do in my life because of this. It's a little bit of I could understand why, if your passion's not into it, why why even bother? You know, it makes total sense. So I think there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong, but you got to make sure that you aren't just doing it over and over and over again to get that new high of whatever's new, because that's really what I think a lot of people end up doing, is just the high of something new and then the immediate crash of realizing either one, it's actually not that fun, or two, they aren't necessarily inherently good at it, so they want to move on immediately from that said hobby. So it's an interesting thing. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I don't think it's good if you're going to keep going at it. You know, you got to find something that you're decent and like, and stick with it. And if there really is nothing you like, then you're just fucked, really. But that's a whole other story for a whole other day. Maybe you don't even have a mind, but we'll talk, or a soul, but we'll talk about that on a different day. But with that being said, tell me what you think in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. If you have a story of somebody who is a continuous hobby jumper, please let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. And a story if you have it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. I will be back on tomorrow with a new video. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I will see you in the next one. Keep it heavy, stay safe out there, and stay warm because it's cold now. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace!